Hey, Rick. Hey, Gary. How are you?
Well, let's see. I'm doing great. How are you doing, man?
Doing well, thanks. Hope everybody
I'm
had a
doing
good
fine
holiday.
also.
All right, we are all set.
Okay, everyone. We're going to begin our work session. First up, before we get into the agenda and some other items that we have for this evening, I'd like to welcome everybody. I'd like to welcome Brad Murray and introduce him to the board. I'm sure most of you remember Brad from last year, the past several years. He's going to provide us with the results of their financial audit. So Brad, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Matt. I'll try and keep this as brief as possible so you can get into the rest of the issues at hand. Rose indicated that she's already distributed a draft copy of the audited financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2020. So I'll sort of run through the highlights here and certainly take any questions. And if there were to be anything beyond this evening, certainly reach out through Rose or through Matt, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or have a more in-depth discussion if necessary, should that be necessary. But very briefly, as in the past, we're engaged to provide two opinions to the district. One is on the financial statements themselves, and one is over your federal programs. We're pleased to report that both of those opinions are unmodified. That's the highest level of assurance we can provide. That's the old unqualified opinion. So certainly a very good thing. And then as you proceed through the document, the management's discussion and analysis on pages 6 through 15, that's prepared by Rose. It provides sort of the highlights of the year, budget to actual, current year compared to the prior year, and sort of why things were up or down or different from what was expected. The actual financial statements themselves begin on page 16. And the first set of financial statements that are there, pages 16 and 17, those are the district's government-wide financial statements. That pulls in all of your long-term assets, long-term liabilities. You'll note on that page, all the way down at the bottom, the district has a negative net position of approximately $26 million as of the end of the year. And that's almost entirely driven by the fact that there's a $60 million pension liability as of June 30th, 2020. That is the district's portion of the unfunded PSERS liability. I'll point out very quickly on page 17 that there is a restatement at the bottom of the page of approximately $2.5 million. I'll come back to that right at the end of my presentation in a couple minutes here. Beginning on page 18 is the fund financial statements. That's the short-term focused financial statements, only current assets, current liabilities. Your general fund had an ending fund balance of $12 million as of June 30th. 3.2 of that is unassigned. That puts you at about 7% of your budget. There's various committed and assigned amounts for fund balance, retirement, healthcare, future PSERS increases, future capital items. I think that really demonstrates that the district is in healthy financial condition. With the size of that fund balance, that you're able to set aside items for future expenditures. A lot of districts we're currently auditing are not in that boat. So that's certainly a big positive. The capital projects fund there at $1.6 million of fund balance as of the end of the year. That's the residual balance from the 2019 bonds, as well as the funds that are in your capital reserve. Skip ahead a little bit to page 20 is the operating statement essentially for your funds, and you'll see that the general fund balance went up by about $600,000, while capital projects fund went down about 1.5. That's just the continued expenditures of the bond proceeds in the current year. Page 22 is your budgetary comparison schedule, and as I indicated, Rose's MD&A goes through and hits the highlights of why you have budgetary variances for the year. You anticipated using a little over $500,000 of fund balance in 1920. Obviously, because this year didn't work out remotely the way anybody expected, your actual fund balance went up by roughly the amount you expected it to go down. So you have a net favorable variance of about $1.2 million. And really the big drivers are related to the closure in the last quarter of the fiscal year. That's essentially why expenditures came in $1 million under what was planned. The next 3 pages are your proprietary fund financial statements. That's the food service operation of the district. Your food service fund ended at a deficit position of about $40,000. And really that's driven by the costs, your fixed costs for personnel really didn't change that much year over year. Some of the food costs were down, but that was offset by the revenue that you took in and the sharp decline in the number of meals you could claim lowered your subsidy amount for the year. So on the bottom of page 24, where you see a net loss of $174,000, essentially that's your lost revenue for the year for those meals that were not served. You probably had in the neighborhood of a 20% decrease in meals in 1920 versus 1819. Page 26 is just your student activity balance as of the end of the year, approximately $110,000 for various student organizations. The next roughly 30 pages of the document are the notes to the financial statements. That'll provide information on your accounting policies, more detail on long-term assets, long-term liabilities. There are a couple lengthy footnotes about your pension and the various inputs there, and your post-employment benefit plans, and that's plans plural. And again, I'll get back to that very briefly. After the footnotes, there are a number of supplementary schedules that are required related to those pension and OPEB plans. And then the last section of the report from page 64 on, all of that relates to your federal programs and compliance audit. And as I indicated, in the current year, you received an unmodified opinion related to your federal single audit. We audited the special education cluster program in the current year based on the results of our testing and inquiries and procedures. We didn't see any reportable issues. What we did encounter in the current year, and this is listed on page 73, and then further referenced in the last 2 pages of the full document. There was a restatement of $2.5 million that was a correction of an error from the prior year financial statements. And that relates to an other post-employment benefit component of the overall PSERS plan. was not included in the district's financial statements last year. So anytime there's an error correction, that's indicative of a deficiency in internal control. So that gives rise to the financial statement finding that's reported. And there's a very brief corrective action plan attached related to that item. And as we've had discussions in previous years about internal control related findings, when they're related to the overall presentation of the financial statements, you don't really run any additional risk as far as federal funding or anything like that. And I do believe this is a one-time thing. It's corrected in the current year financial statements and presented within. So the beginning balance was restated. The ending balance includes the amount and it's properly disclosed and recorded. So I wouldn't expect any additional issues as a result. I think the audit and the related corrective action plan will be accepted as filed without issue. Are there any questions related to anything I've gone over? And again, certainly I'd be more than happy outside of this to answer any questions or follow up in any more detail if anybody so chose, but any specific questions on any of the items included?
Brad, this is Bernice Fiorella. I just had one question.
Sure.
Bernice, I think you cut out on us.
Yeah, she had texted me saying that she was having some problems. She was going to sign in through her phone for audio. So we'll give her a second to get back in and ask her question.
In the meantime, does anybody else have any questions to this point?
Okay, she is still having trouble with her audio. She did text me a question to ask Brad, so I'll forward that. She wants me to ask if we have an extra 1 million that we did not spend. I'm not sure where that's coming from. Our expenses were under budget by 1 million, if she's looking at that figure, but that's not the overall, the net change in our fund balance. The net change is about 500,000.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah, because you intended to actually dip into beginning fund balance by a little over 650,000 with the cost savings for the year. You end up with a favorable variance, so you added $600,000 essentially for the year. But you did spend $1 million less than you planned. So sort of the net of those, along with the little bit of additional revenue that came in, I think that sort of makes up the gap there. So hopefully that answers the question. Again, certainly I'd be more than happy to discuss further if necessary. And I do want to certainly thank Rose and her staff for the job that they did. Auditing was very challenging this year, and has been and still is. And everybody did a great job in really accommodating us and getting things to us in a timely manner. And we really appreciate that. Rose and her staff do a wonderful job. I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but very appreciative, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Brad. And Bernice just texted. She said thank you for the answer.
right.
We appreciate it.
All right.
She's going to try to call into the meeting so that she can listen to the rest of the audio. Is there any other questions from any of the other board members?
I don't have any questions, but I would like to thank Brad and you, Rose, for always making it easy to understand and putting the numbers out clearly.
All right. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you. And again, we're both available if you have further questions after you review. I mean, it's a big document, and I'm sure that I generally just sent that out yesterday. If anybody does go through it and have questions, you can always get in a hold of me. And, you know, I can get a hold of Brad and we can discuss if there's further questions.
This is Bill. I just want to echo what Rick said. I am in total agreement. Thank you, Brad, and thank you, Rose, and everybody who worked on it.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. Okay.
All
If
right.
nothing else, I'll let Brad get back to his office, which I'm sure he's still working because there's a lot of schools that need their financial statements. So thank you very much, Brad, for joining us
All right.
tonight. And
Thanks
I
a
will
lot.
let you know if there's any
Have a
further
good
questions.
night.
Brad,
you.
thank you very much. We appreciate all your help.
Thanks, Matt.
Talk to you soon.
You too.
Okay, everyone. If there are no other questions pertaining to that, we will move along to the agenda.
Matt, I did have 2 emails that came in. Do you want to start with those, or do you want to go through agenda first and then go to comments?
Why don't we hit those comments currently? And
Okay,
then we could revisit if there are any others at the end. And if they're emails and lengthy, maybe give a brief synopsis. I did look at them earlier. Rose, you want to just mention who they're from and then kind of a summary as to what they're pertaining to?
sure. Yeah, I did receive 2. They came in during the day, but they are pertaining to the work session, and they did want this information passed along to the board. The first one comes from one of our teachers, and she is writing, "With gratefulness for the opportunity to teach virtually this past week and the week leading up to Christmas." She wanted to commend all of the students, many of whom participated more virtually than they did within the classroom. And she also wanted to commend her colleagues for sharing resources that have helped all of them become better virtual teachers. She thanks the board for the opportunity to teach virtually and for the resources that they've been given to teachers and students to make it work as effectively as it has. I will forward this email to all the board just so you have the full email, but it was given to us by one of our teachers, Grace Bocconi Ajelli. The second email that came in from Marta Pike. She is a grandmother, and she made comments on the remote learning. She said that the current remote learning situation to which her students are being subjected, as a grandparent and person with a background in education at the elementary, middle, and high school levels, she said she was appalled that this school district believes that any level of actual learning is taking place for the general population of the district. She has 2 elementary level grandchildren that are learning, if it not for her and her husband providing continual guidance and encouragement, she said it would have been a waste of their time. Students need competent in-person educators and interaction with other students to have any real level of learning. She goes on and she said, "I would ask the Western Wayne Board of Education to do their duty to the taxpayers and students of the Western Wayne community and allow in-person schooling to take place." And again, that was from Marta Pike. Those are the only 2 that I've received so far. I will continue to monitor the email account if anybody else has further questions during the meeting. Thank you.
I guess briefly, I would just like to reiterate that our teachers and students have done a phenomenal job. I know it's been difficult for some families. It's been very stressful, but at the same time, our teachers are making it work, and our students are participating and doing a great job. And I would argue the fact that they are very competent in what they're doing, and they are making a difference, regardless if they're virtual or in person. Okay. That being said, I'd like to move along to the agenda. We have our typical roll call, pledge, etc. Approval of minutes is number 5. Number 6 is our treasurer's report. Number 7 is our approval of bills. Number 8, we have our accounting of taxes. Number 9, we do have some student recognition, as well as our school board recognition for the month of January. We were hoping to have some student council members join us virtually if possible. If not, we do have some certificates of thanks for the board. We'll be distributing those after the board meeting. So, thank you to the school board for all you do prior to the board meeting. We do appreciate your work and your support for all of us in the district. So number 10, we have public recognition. Number 11 is our enrollment report. Which our enrollment has remained steady from last month. We're 1855 total enrollment. Number 12 is our budget resolution. This is to adopt a resolution that there will be no increase beyond the state mandated index for Western Wayne, which is at 3.0% for the school year. So anything between 0 and 3%, this resolution is allowing us to work within those means when it comes time to look at taxes. Rose, after I get through the next 2, do you want to chime in and maybe give a little more detail if necessary?
Yes.
Number 13 is our audit that was just reviewed by Brad from Brian Kelly and Associates. And that's for the year ending June 30th, 2020. Number 14 is our fund balance designation. We're looking at for our, this is the GASB 54, where we have committed, assigned, and unassigned factors of the fund balance. The committed amount is $1,047,102. The assigned amount is $7,614,828, and unassigned we have $3,193,942. Rose, any elaboration on those items?
Yes, just one thing for the item number 12, the budget resolution, that 3% Act 1 index. We've done some preliminary calculations, and if we were to go to the index, which is the highest amount you guys will go anywhere from 0% to 3%. That 3% would generate about $806,000 if needed to balance out the 21-22 budget. So I think that we will definitely, based on where we are financially and what we see coming in, we should definitely be able to stay within that index or below for the coming school year. It's hard to say exactly where we'd end up right now. We don't have any state funding numbers or federal funding numbers yet for next year, but we will, as things come through in the next couple of months, we will certainly be talking more about the budget. 13 is the audit as presented by Brad. The draft that you received at this point does not, I do not believe it'll be changed at all. The only thing that will be added to that is the actual dates. So the approval dates of the 13th once you accept the audit. And then the third item, number 14, is the fund balance designation. And I know Dr. Barrett read the different numbers and categories. So the committed amount, that $1,047,000, That is committed towards retirement incentives and healthcare incentives that we already have committed to for people that have retired from the district. The assigned amount is for future costs under healthcare increases, PSERS, and capital projects. And that's the $7,600,000. The unassigned is 3.1, almost $3.2 million. And that amount is not assigned to anything, it's an unassigned. At our budget level in our size district, we are allowed to have an 8% unassigned budget. Anything above that would have to be committed or assigned. And that $3.2 million that we have unassigned is about a 7% of our budget. So we are below the 8%, which makes us compliant with the state.
This is Bill. Rose, every year I mention this in January, because in past years, I think there was some misunderstanding about number 12, people thinking that this was a commitment to raise taxes or something. Instead, it gives us flexibility, correct? In other words, doing this allows us to have the budget, the final one in June, right?
Yes, that's correct, Bill. We will do a tentative budget in May and then the final budget in June. If we were to not do this motion right now, we'd have to go into a full budget presentation within the first few weeks of February. But that would be indicating that we were needing to go to that 3% Act 1 index and then also be seeking additional dollars either through referendum or exceptions through the state. So that is the only alternative for us now, would to say, hey, that 3% is not going to be enough. We need to go above, which I do not believe we're at. I think we will be well within our 3%. So
thank you. I just wanted to, because of past misunderstandings, it's always good, I think, to say that. Thank you, Rose.
thank you.
Yes, thank you, Rose. And through the CARES Act, along the lines of budgeting, we're not certain exactly what type of number we're getting at this point, but we do anticipate receiving some federal funds and some state level funding in the next several months. We're just not sure of a time frame nor an exact amount. We do have an idea. However, those funds are designated specifically for certain items such as technology as a result of the pandemic, COVID supplies, safety supplies, any instructional materials that we need as a result of student learning loss. So there's a whole list of items that would qualify spending, but we do have to utilize it for those funds and not supplement it with in our fund balance or in our budget, excuse me. So we will keep you posted as we move forward with that. Moving down to number 15, alternative learning days. So in collaboration with the association, we've been working to develop and work towards flexible instructional days, which are state approved days that we would be able to utilize in the event of inclement weather or another emergency situation. Now, flexible instructional days would allow up to 5 days of learning, remote learning, in the event that we have a snow day. And that those days would count for the required instructional hours that we have to report to the state. This year, because we passed the resolution, that's section 520.1, where it gives us the flexibility to move in and out of remote, in-person, synchronous, asynchronous learning. We're calling them for this year alternative learning days, with the hope that next year we could apply for the flexible instructional days. So this is kind of a test run, and with the flexibility that we have with the resolution that was passed as a result of the pandemic, we can implement these days on a trial basis. We took models from other districts across the state that currently have flexible instructional days. So what the current model would look like is that if we know in advance that there's a storm pending and there's a good likelihood that we can be home the following day, or 2 or 3 days, whatever it might be, we would notify students and staff in advance, take your materials home. Teachers would upload assignments into the Google Classroom for the following day, and the day before, give students a bit of an explanation. So any students that would not have technology access, or for some reason, if they don't have technology access, we would also provide hard copies of materials for them to take home. Or in the event that a power outage occurs that following day or whatever, they're not able to complete the work on that day. Upon return to school, they would have 3 days to complete those assignments. And the completion of those assignments for each class period that they are in, or each content area that they are in, counts towards their attendance. So the day of the alternative learning day, teachers would be required to have office hours be accessible by email. Right now, the plan is from 9 to 12:30 and then 1 to 3. Again, the students would be able to send questions, get clarification on an assignment, things of that nature. And then when the students come back, the grading can start for the teachers, and then logging the attendance that way. So that's kind of a summary. I did send out a revised draft today. We just tweaked a few things in terms of communication. We put an FAQ together, for families, which we will post on the website. And we would notify everybody like we normally do for a snow day, but we would just call it, say tomorrow would be an alternative learning day, asynchronous for students, etc. So does anybody, after reviewing that or after that explanation, have any questions at the moment?
I have a few questions. It's Dana, DC Auto. My first one is, I know you said 5 days typical. So is this an atypical year where it's an undetermined amount of time that we can use these days?
It is. We could. We prefer synchronous learning if we have to do virtual. But again, this is in the event that this is something foreseeable.
Right. So I guess that's my main question is, if this isn't a foreseeable thing and we're going to have a large amount of asynchronous learning, I just don't think that that's productive for the students. I feel like they're already behind at this point. Watching my children on virtual meets the last 5 days was hard. That you're listening to teachers, and I love all of our teachers. I think they're doing a tremendous job, but for the first 20 minutes of the day, they're taking attendance and they're undo your video, undo your mute, undo this, undo that. It's 15 minutes of class time that's basically wasted. So if we're just going to hand them an assignment, I just feel like we're going to fall even further behind. So if we're going to vote on something like this, I think it needs to be a determined number of days. And if we can get it virtual, I think that's the only way that it's going to work, because an asynchronous day, I just don't see the value in it. I would rather see them in school at the end of the year.
And Dana, I understand your points very much. And again, we also agree that in-person learning is the best, and we would like that. Basically, we can limit this for sure, maybe 3 to 5 this year at most, and use this kind of as a trial period and kind of work out any kinks that we might have, given that we have the flexibility. In the event that next year we do decide to apply for those flexible days. Now, in the event that we're virtual and, there's a storm coming, we don't have to use this alternative learning day, in communication with the association today, we thought if we're already virtual, we notify the staff that tomorrow will be virtual, but stay home. And we can count that for, a synchronous day. But this is more in the event that if students are coming in to school, we don't want them on the roads. So we would utilize something like this so that we're not tacking on, if it gets to like 10, 12, days that we're out of school, this would be a substitute that we can minimize at the end of the school year, the extent that, we're going deep into June, especially with high school kids, with work schedules, military, college, et cetera. That becomes a concern at times. So that's the reason for these. So again, it's a trial. It's modeled after several districts across the state that currently do it, and we just kind of piecemealed it to fit our needs.
Hey, Matt, it's Joe. This is basically based on weather-related then issues, so to speak.
Primarily, but it could be for flooding. It could be for like if we know a big storm's coming, and the first day or two, as we mentioned in the last meeting, we say, okay, we need to do the snow days. But on the third day, at least we can get some work in, the students working online with teacher access, and be able to complete work upon return to school if for some reason they can't.
Okay. All right.
If there's a power outage for some reason, there's a windstorm, there's a water main break, I don't know, whatever it might be, and we know something in event, we could utilize it in any emergency situation.
Okay.
I think that's another problem within itself. I know my internet's awful, and no matter what we do to try to fix it, it's not getting fixed. Like we're not able to get. But so my question in regards to that is, on Monday, my kids had severe internet problems because of the storm that happened on Sunday night. So now, if this is a storm situation again, there's going to be even more people that are going to have those kinds of issues as well, and it's going to make it harder for these kids to log on.
Correct, which is why we built in some parameters that if that is the case, that there is a lack of internet or whatever, we do provide extended time for them to complete the work even upon return. If they have a study hall or some time built in the school day or after school, that they can get it done at that point and then hand it in at a later time. But also a lot of the work, can be provided in paper format prior to the day of as well. So if you don't have good internet access, talk to the teacher, we could request documents in that format.
Dana, this is Cindy. We also talked about the other offline options. So if we know this is going to happen tomorrow, the teachers would instruct the students to download the material to their device, so they wouldn't need the internet connection in order to complete it.
Thank you, Cindy. Yes. And again, I know we have the flexibility this year, but I would not want to implement many of these myself. I think we keep it under 5. If hopefully we don't even have to get that far. Maybe we cap it at 3, and we could discuss that further, but at least if we get the plan in place, we could have that option.
So when we're voting on this, if there is a possibility for them to actually be virtual versus asynchronous, that's something that we're going to do, because I would much rather my kids be in front of a computer with their teacher teaching them versus them saying, here, do this assignment, and then them half doing it and handing it in to say, I went to school that day.
Well,
Seems like it makes sense.
It's not as simple as that, Dana. I mean, it's not just here's a piece of paper and get it done. There'll be some lesson component to it. They would be uploading several resources for the students to utilize. And I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought after that, but Dana, what was your other point about?
I was going to say, I was going to chime in there too, Matt. I think it makes sense as a kind of a pilot program to test the waters a little bit while we have this year already in this virtual format, or at least portions of the year, to test the waters and make sure the system works properly and see how things, what works and what doesn't work. I think it makes sense. And I like your idea of limiting the amount of time, just a couple, like you said, kind of test the waters.
Exactly. And again, this would be when students are coming into the building. If it's live instruction, this would be something we could utilize if we know something's coming in advance for a day or two, at best. And then, moving forward. But again, we might not have that ability to call in advance, and we would just have a normal snow day or 2-hour delay, whatever it might be, and tack it on at the end. So that, we're not trying to use this every time there's a storm by any means.
Hey, Matt, Jeff Gogolski here. I just want to chime in. I know we had some discussions about it, and I think the 3 to 5 day time frame is good. I'm actually reading through that. I'm in support of it. I don't like us going deep into the summer when the learning isn't quite there as well, even in class. And the assignments that we talked about, I think, are pretty thorough. Gives them a little more responsibility on their end, but the time frame they have to get that work turned back in is fair. I also think there was some obstacles, the way you explained it to me, to just flip the switch and have the teachers are still required to report to the building. So you have those issues there as to why you had to do some of those snow days. Am I right on that?
Correct. And actually, the days that were snow days in December, we were still in session. We were live in person. This most recent one was a 2-hour delay, and that is because we did have staff coming in, Jeff. That's accurate.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on number 15? Okay, number 16, this is an amendment to the current contract we have with Geisinger. We utilize Geisinger to provide medical resources, our athletic trainer as well. What they're proposing here is a new software program that would increase communication between the student, the parent, the trainer, and the coaches. It would allow them to upload documentation in case of an injury. They could track the progress and monitor any reports that might go along with that. So looking at it, it looks like a pretty comprehensive program. And at no additional cost here. It's just something they're going to utilize on their end. Again, just to make sure that they're a little bit more detail oriented in the process in the event of an injury.
Hey, Matt, that's all. Let's just say if a student was to be injured or something happened like that, the parents have the right, I guess, so to speak, to okay that. Like, would that be, I'm trying to say how to, it would be,
give permission to utilize
that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. That's what I was trying to say. Sorry.
Yeah. And it's HIPAA compliant so that all the student information and documentation is confidential, et cetera.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, number 17 is a waiver of expulsion. This stems back to the incident last month that we had at the high school that we discussed. This was the last student piece of that. Number 18 is personnel. We have a few subs on the list for guest teacher, as well as custodian. We do have a sabbatical request in letter B for the second semester for restoration of health. Letter C, we do have two long-term substitute appointments there as a result of the sabbatical requested last month and then this current one on the agenda this month. So we'll discuss those in executive session. We have two resignations and we have some volunteers to approve as well for boys and girls basketball. Informational dates and the IRS mileage rate is decreasing to 56 cents per mile effective January 1st. And that's our agenda. Any other questions pertaining to any of those line items or topics we discussed? Okay. Moving forward, the one thing I would like to discuss is if and when we go back in session, with the teachers working in both Google format and live instruction, we did provide some early dismissal days for teachers to utilize planning, gather resources, distribute documentation, etc. So we're looking to propose 3 early dismissal days, 1 in each of the next 3 months, and depending on where we're at moving forward, if we need to implement more thereafter, we can do that. So we're looking at January 29th, February 26th, and March 26th to provide teachers with some additional time there. So if everyone's okay with that, we can notify everyone of those dates moving forward. So parents can plan and teachers are aware.
Fine with me.
Matt,
Yes.
this is Gary. Prior to the Christmas vacation, we were having a teacher's day about every week or sometimes every week and a half. Why are we now pushing the half day out to once a month?
It was actually structured so that we tried to do it once every 2 weeks. And then we built it also around some days that we already had planned for Act 80 in-services. So looking at, being that we're currently virtual, not knowing what we're doing next week at this point, we're proposing just 1 for this month. However, next month, even though there's only 1 early dismissal for this purpose, we also have 2 weeks after the 29th of January, February, let me get the exact date. I think it's the 13th. February 12th is an Act 80 day in-service, so that's also an early dismissal. We also have March 12th, which is an Act 80 day. So that would space these days out 2 weeks apart so that we could still provide teachers time on those Act 80 days as well. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense.
And again, if we need to reconsider, I'll consult with the board and we can do so at that time. But I think looking at the calendar, this makes the most sense at this point. Everybody is okay with that?
Yep, I am.
Okay. All right. And now to the big question. We had a lot of data being distributed over the last few days, looking at where we're at in terms of current cases, as well as county level data, zip code level data. Jeff, thank you very much for providing your breakdown from the last week and a half. And unfortunately, I didn't get the hospital data until today, but I did send that earlier. Now from the state level, our county data is still, we're in the substantial category. Even though some cases were down in the last couple of days, overall, we're still pretty high compared to where we were in, prior to the holidays. So looking at everything and going back to our discussions with the physicians from Wayne Memorial, their recommendation was if we can get 2 weeks of kids not in the buildings at this point, that would be most ideal to minimize the surge that would be going through the community. And again, they stressed that this current week that we're in, we're probably not going to see a big surge because of the amount of time it takes for people to develop symptoms or with the transmission rate. So they felt that the following week would be when you really start to see it hit the fan. So again, my recommendation would, I know it's not ideal. And again, we understand it's very difficult for some families, for many families. But, I'm not a physician. I'm going to take their advice, especially when I'm not qualified to deal with, health-related information or health-related decisions. So that's my stance. We want our students in person as soon as possible. We'll do whatever the board decides that they believe is in the best interest. But again, from my viewpoint, I have to consider the safety of our students, our staff at every level. So if anybody wants to chime in at this point, I could briefly, for the public, give you current data as to where we're at from a, we have 4 positives in the district and 9 quarantines currently. And obviously we had one go out yesterday. That was, and then as a result, we had 4 quarantines there. In the past week, we did become aware of others, those 2 others from students and staff that needed to quarantine as a result. The good part about that was that they hadn't been in school due to the holiday, so we didn't have to close contact anybody within the district other than their families.
So for those on quarantine before holiday, are they cleared now or are they still in quarantine?
Up to today, I believe, was the last day that we would have had somebody prior to the holiday in quarantine. I believe today was the last day for that group, but now we have this new group that need to quarantine from the numbers I just read.
So we have 2 positive or just 1 at this point? Because I saw something with 1 and 4. Has that changed?
4 total. One that was positive while they were in the building.
Okay, thank you.
So Matt, so as far as staff, and I think kind of where Mike was going there, I think that's just the main question I always have. There's 2 parts to this, but my main is staff. How do you feel, or how does everybody feel about the staff? Are we able to staff appropriately?
Currently, yes. I did send out the quantity of staff that we do have out. We have, where did my paper go? 15 So this is just teachers. This doesn't include the aides, but we have 15 teachers out on either FMLA or sabbatical. And the sabbatical can, some of those are medical as well, or restoration of health.
Okay.
We do have some future leaves. We have 3 coming up in the next few months. So currently, we've been able to manage. Well, I should say now we did go through a stretch in between the holidays where it was a disaster, many levels, trying to fill the void of teachers out sick or having to quarantine. That really caused concern.
Right.
Having to close down Evergreen. Now, this week, it looks like we should be okay because we had that time in between and not many had to quarantine or had the quarantine was over as a result. But again, the concern is if they start to pop up in the buildings, that's really going to be an issue.
Yep. And I guess that was, the second, not really part of my question, but a statement. We talked about this whenever it was the last time we all got together last week. And my feeling on this is that this is something we need to do every week. And I know that's not what everybody wants to hear, probably. But this is just how I feel. The way that the world that we're in and the way that things are going, I think we need to do it on a weekly basis. I know we'll be meeting next week anyway, right? No matter what, again.
Right.
So that's just my way of thinking. We're going to be here anyway next week. Whatever happens, whatever we decide tonight for next week, we're going to be here next week again. Let's take another vote, or let's see where the numbers are at. We'll keep going. I know I'm listening to everybody and texting and talking and people calling. There's a lot of people, and I don't just mean board members. There's a lot of people doing some research and study and looking into things. So, I just think that's my opinion. I just think every week whether we have a meeting or not, we need to have a meeting, and that's kind of what I'm getting at by that statement. So.
And this is Jeff here. I agree with Joe. The information that I compiled the past week, the source is coming directly from Pennsylvania Department of Health. I think information is filtering in from a lot of different sources. We need to really stick with one main source. I think that source is probably the most accurate that we've got to go off of. The spreadsheet and the numbers that I shared over this past week, the numbers are trending down from what I'm seeing, and we just need to, and I'm going to continue to update these spreadsheets, but I feel just like Joe that we need to meet weekly to look at this on a week-to-week basis, because things could change quick, but in the short term, things seem to be trending in a good direction when we look at just our locality.
I agree with you guys also, and thank you, Jeff, for putting that spreadsheet together. It always makes it easier to make these decisions when we have the data, accurate data from one source. I really appreciate it.
Sorry for the interruption. I just want to let you know, Bernice is still having audio problems. She has been trying to speak, but none of us can hear her. So Brian's working with her to fix that. But just so you know, she's not participating. She is having audio issues.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
This is Gary.
Sorry,
Can I
Gary,
go,
I didn't mean to- I spoke to Bernice earlier, and I know that she did have some input that she wanted to bring into the meeting. So hopefully she can get on her audio.
Harry, we hear you. Just you're on mute again.
There we go.
Can I go now?
All you, Gary.
Okay, thanks. I've studied your spreadsheets, and I thank you guys for your work in doing this. But I'm basing my opinion on something different. Back in June, in April, and March, I knew no one who had COVID. Now it's all around me. And anywhere from a friend of ours just passing away last week, to people being on respirators, to being sick, to no more than just the sniffles. I think that your numbers are a little false. And I think we need to show a little bit more caution than what you're talking about.
Gary, this is Ethan. I very much agree with what you just said. I also know somebody who has died recently from COVID, and I've also known a lot of people who have had very mild cases, and it's obviously there are medical considerations as to who gets a severe case and who doesn't, but there's no guarantees that even if you're a young person, you're not going to get a severe case. I also think that the numbers, they do speak for themselves. We should look at the Department of Health's numbers. And when you do that, if you look at the early warning system that they have set up that's used to give their recommendations as to what school districts should be doing, if you look at all the counties in Pennsylvania, you can sort by the different numbers that they show. And one of those is the percent of tests that come back positive. And Wayne County is number 7 out of 67 Pennsylvania counties on that list. The other is the number of cases in the last 7 days in proportion of the population. And we're either number 9 or 10, I forget which. But it's undeniable that we have a severe outbreak right now. And like Gary said, it's everywhere. So I can't in good conscience vote to reopen the schools under these circumstances. I just can't do it. And I also think that it's very difficult for families to plan out if we're going to be doing this every week. And we're looking at, tiny fluctuations that could have 100 confounding factors in it, then that's just so difficult to plan around because people need to arrange childcare. They need to arrange a lot of things. So I do think we should be more cognizant of that. I don't know that voting on this every week is sustainable.
This is Bill. I can't say much more. I agree with what has just been said with Gary and with Ethan. Also, I just wanted to mention that, as I did at our last meeting, and thank you, Jeff, for compiling the zip code information, but it's somewhat, I don't know if I should say misleading, because the zip codes go across border lines. It's not just Western Wayne. Like I said, Lake Ariel, for instance, 18436, includes Mount Cobb in Lackawanna County, and Hollisterville is a Moscow zip code, and some residents of South Canaan Township, it's the Holmesdale zip code. So I'm not sure that it gives us as accurate a picture as we might think with the zip codes, although again, it's information that's useful to have.
Bill, yeah, and I appreciate your comments, and you're right, there is no perfect way to analyze that data. However, actually, if you look at it from that standpoint with the zip codes, we have a lot that carry into Lackawanna County, and so most likely those numbers are Lackawanna County cases. In the Waymart area, we also have it where it carries into Lackawanna County. It includes the prisons, and as I explained in the spreadsheet, you have these, because I went on both prison websites to look at what they've reported, and it appears they do a data dump where not every day they're putting it on their own site, but then every so many days they list how many cases the inmates that tested positive, and then you'll see this big spike in Waymart. So the numbers are misleading to some degree, but the way I'm looking at it, it actually looks like the numbers are more positive than negative when you look at it from that standpoint. So that's how I'm disseminating these numbers. And I understand the information that's out there countywide. I still look at it, we need to look at a macro standpoint instead of a micro standpoint, I'm sorry, instead of a macro standpoint, because we're dealing just from a district standpoint. So
Rick, this afternoon you sent a text with information on it, correct?
Yes, somebody forwarded that to me at the end of the day. I got it when I checked my phone.
I can ask what your source was, if you knew. It was not good news that you sent. So
Yeah, that was that the website was covidactnow.org. So I don't know anything about the site. I just know that's all was sent to me.
But it was clearly wrong because it stated that there was 85 cases, and I don't care if it was per 50,000 residents or 100,000 residents. There were 17 today. So that information was either old or it's from a wrong site. But I'd also like to say Jeff's spreadsheet and his numbers include Moscow. So he's including those numbers in there. Unless he's dissected them and then just taken out the Wayne County residents within there, he's overstating our numbers anyways. So in terms of our numbers, they look beneficial, not beneficial, but better than what county is doing overall, on top of the fact that we have 2 prisons and 2 nursing homes within Wayne County.
yeah, that's right, Dana. There really isn't a way for me to peel the numbers between who are in the North Pocono district versus Western Wayne in that zip code. So I just figured I'm going to just put the raw data out as it's being presented, and then we just have to take it from there. But and that's why I listed Lackawanna County cases each day versus Wayne County. And so when you see that spike, say in the Moscow zip code, you'll also see that spike in Lackawanna County. And it's basically very proportional on those days where those spikes happen within that zip code and within the 2 counties.
I guess I just don't. I work in Honesdale. I go there every day. So whether it's higher in Honesdale or Waymart, there isn't a wall around Western Wayne School District that's protecting us from community spread that's just next door.
This is Mike. I mean, it's a little confusing because we're telling us everybody to close schools for 2 weeks. But then this week, the casinos and all the restaurants were open again throughout the state. So, I mean, if the casinos could be open and the restaurants could be open, why can't we reopen our schools with the same data?
Along with the sports being allowed to start back up again. And from what I'm seeing, I know Western Wayne hasn't started up sports, but I did hear that some of the bordering schools are allowing practice to start up again, which makes no sense to me.
I just got a call here from Bernice. She wanted to speak, so I'm going to mute my speaker so we don't get any feedback and she'll be able to talk, I think, through my phone into the speaker on my laptop here. So Bernice, are you still there?
Yes, I am. And please let me know if you can't hear me.
All right.
I think, we have discussed this for quite a while now, and I believe we all have done our research. Now, the statistics that we have before us, we have, I called the coroner today, out of the 24 deaths in the area, 10 is from Wayne County. All ages are over 65. And we had a number with 94, 96. So I believe we all know where we stand. I think we need to go ahead and just take the vote. I believe we need to be in person school. So if anybody has anything else to say, I really believe we all are where we are. And everybody has had the data, had the facts. If we need to, let's take a roll call vote and see where we are. Rose, what do you think? Are we good there?
Was everyone able to hear that?
Yep.
Yeah.
I heard it.
Able to hear Bernice. I believe that we can do that. Is that correct, Matt Muir?
Somebody needs to make a motion first,
Right.
and then somebody needs to second it, and then it needs to be open for discussion by our Madam Chairwoman, and then she needs to call for the vote.
Right, correct. Matt Barrett, is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, again, the big part of my recommendation, not only because it's, a PDE and Department of Health recommendation was, our local physicians who have supported us and encouraged us at the start of the year to go back and assisted us with that, have changed their tune a little bit for these next 2 weeks, which is my biggest concern, hearing it from them. Again, we have a meeting on Friday to discuss potential vaccinations within our district, as well as the other surrounding districts for staff. And then next Monday, we also have a meeting to discuss at that point. I could obviously bring back more information next week, but I'm just trying to provide you with as much information as possible and what I have learned from my meetings as well. After
Okay, great, Matt. Thank you. And I have to say, at this point, I know some people don't like to do it week by week, but I think for a number of board members that maybe have seen the facts this evening from Jeff, thank you for that, feel safer doing it week at a time. And so at this point, if anyone has a motion to either go in person next week or virtual, that motion should be made at this time.
I make a motion for in-person.
I'm sorry, Mike.
Sorry, Rick. I was gonna make a motion for in-person, but.
Okay, the motion has been made to be in person for the following week, and that week will be January 11th through the 15th. Is there a second on the motion? And
Second.
I will second that motion. So the motion has been made, I believe, by Mr. Auckland and then seconded by myself, Ms. Fiorella. Rose, can we have a roll call vote for in-person as of the following week?
Are we going to have any conversation?
Does anybody have anything they want to say?
Yep, and I just want to briefly say I'm really torn. This is one of the most difficult decisions I think we've had to make as a board, and I really I spoke to a family physician yesterday, asked for his input. He's treated 29 cases so far. His recommendation to me was to stay virtual, at least short term. So as Dr. Barrett said earlier, none of us are physicians, and since this is a medical issue, I think I'm going to lean toward following doctor's advice at this point. But I really do. I'm really struggling with what the appropriate answer is here.
Rick, and thank you for that, as we all have. And everyone has researched the data and has to go by that data. But I value education. And my kids need educated. And I believe every parent has that right to make that choice. We have done a wonderful job in this district to provide 3 forms of education. And if anyone has an elderly individual that they need to protect, then by all means, go virtual or do Google Live. And if we can still provide Google Live as an option, I would love to see that happen. But I believe there is a risk in everything we do as parents. And I believe that we need to educate our children top foremost and allow the parents to make that decision. Nothing has changed. And we are almost 1 year in, everyone, and we have asked our kids to do everything. Wear masks, social distance, put up the partition in lunch. They're doing all of that. And we need to educate them. This goes far beyond COVID. You've heard me say before, I'm not going to go into my rant. Mental aspect of it. Socialization for these kids. They need it. And they are not at risk. And so at that point, that's my discussion. Is there anything else that anybody would like to say before we do a roll call vote? Okay,
Well,
hearing
the only,
none.
Bernice, hold it. Bernice, the only thing is, and maybe this is for after, but will we be making another decision next week? Is that a question for now?
I'd like to see that happen. Yes, Joe.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with you, Joe. I think we need to do this weekly. I have already volunteered to continue the spreadsheet, continue to share the numbers. And however this vote, the outcome is tonight, I think we should be looking at this weekly and making decisions weekly, for as inconvenient as it may or may not be, at least for the immediate future.
Agreed. Thank you.
Okay. Rose, do you want to go ahead with the roll call vote?
Yes.
Now, the motion has been made to be in person for next week, and everyone is clear it is going against the recommendation. So if we could move forward, Rose, with the roll call vote.
Mrs. Fiorella,
I am a yes.
Mr. Hoke,
I'm a no.
Mr. Gregolski,
Yes.
Mrs. DeCiato,
Yes.
Mr. Enslin,
No.
Mr. Gershi,
No.
Mr. Gambita,
Yes.
Mr. Auckland,
Yes.
and Mr. Wood.
No.
Mrs. Fiorella, you have 5 yes votes, and that motion carries.
That motion does pass. At this point, we will be in person next week, and we will go over the data once again the following week. And I know it might not be great for a lot of people, but I think if we can do it week by week, I think it would make some very happy.
Bernice, I agree with you. I think we need to basically be doing this week by week. And if the numbers shoot up, I'll be the first to say we'll have to pull the plug and go virtual again. So
I'm the same way, Jeff. I feel the same way. Absolutely. 100%.
And I agree as well.
Very good. Thank you.
I have a question for Matt about hybrid. So say if the numbers spike, is hybrid an option or we're just going to go virtual?
It is an option, depending on where we're at in terms of substantial, the amount of cases, transmission rates, all of that stuff. I wouldn't, depending on the severity, I would lean towards virtual. And then as the numbers come down, maybe move to more of a hybrid approach. But quite honestly, the hybrid approach causes so many logistical nightmares, from transportation to special education. We're also in the consortium with Wayne Highlands and Walden Pawpack. High school scheduling. There's a lot that goes into it that we're ready for, and we'll do it. But quite honestly, I don't believe it's as effective as fully in or fully virtual at this point.
Okay, thank you. One more question. Since we say in person, what about the sports and PIAA? They have made a decision, or it's up to the school districts at this point?
It's up to the school district. So I would assume if we're in person, we would allow athletics at this point. The question would have been, if we were virtual, where do we want to go with after school athletics, being that practices in other districts are starting.
Okay, so do we need a vote? If you go virtual again, do we need to have a vote on sports as a separate thing to let them in?
No, if we're fully in, then we can participate, unless you don't want to go ahead with athletics as a result. But we would go ahead with athletics unless we're fully virtual. We could discuss it if we have to go virtual at that point as well. But if again, being that it looks like we're going to be in, the students would be participating.
Right, that's my example. Say next week we vote virtual because the numbers spike, or somewhere in the future, and we're in the middle of a sports season. So we would have to do a separate vote to allow the kids to go into school when we're virtual to play the games, right?
I don't believe so. I think we could probably again, I would think the concern would be, if we're virtual, are we going to allow it? But if we're in, or even in a hybrid situation, I would think the athletics, we already have an athletic safety plan in place. So we would follow that.
All right, thank you.
Matt, there's just one thing that I wanted to say real quick was if we do have a certain school that may be having problems filling staffing, would we be able to just allow, say it's the high school, would the high school just go virtual, and can we keep the other schools in person?
Yes, that's an option, of course. I mean, especially if, many cases start to pop up and we're forced to close because of that, following the, if depending on the number of students in a building determines how many cases you can have in that building before the recommendation to close school for 3 to 5 days or 2 weeks for that matter, depending on how bad the outbreak is.
Right, but I'm not talking about an outbreak. I'm talking about possible teachers not wanting to come in because we are in person as opposed to virtual.
Well, yes, again, if
And we don't have the staffing to staff that building, can we just do one school at a time virtual as opposed to shutting the whole district?
yes, but again, if there's a staff concern, getting substitutes in there is going to be difficult as well if we have to go virtual for that building.
Right. Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure
Does that make sense? But yes, that is an option.
Okay. Thank you. Anything further this evening, anyone?
I do have a few more emails that came in during the meeting if you'd like me to review those.
Yes, please go ahead, Rose.
Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm just gonna let you know we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We had 4 additional emails that came in support of going back into in-person learning. Most of them saying that their students are struggling during the virtual learning and would prefer to be back in person. That was from 4 different emails. I will make sure that all the board members do receive these emails.
Would you also read the names, Rose, of those?
Sure. The first one came in from Ellen Dramasino. Second one from William Warnock. Third one was from Felicia Prope. And then the fourth one was from Nathaniel Swingle. Those 4 were in support of going back virtual. Another email came in from Heather Fedoric, and she was questioning about the hybrid model, but I believe that Mike Auckland did ask that question, and I think her question would have been answered because she just asked, what about the hybrid model? The last email that came in was from Lisa Swingle, and she had asked, what will be your decision on paying for transportation? I know that is something that we do have to discuss, so I did want to bring that one up too.
Yeah, that is something that we will discuss. I know there was a webinar today that they gave a couple options. So I know Rose was reviewing those today to see what would be most beneficial and most realistic for the district. So we do have to dive into that a little bit more and talk to the board about what direction we want to go.
Yes, I am going to prepare a little more information so that I could provide that to the board before they make a decision on it. I do have to get some additional information. And the last email that did come in was from an Erica Germani, one of our teachers, and she did ask about the COVID spreadsheet numbers that you guys were discussing. And she said she's tracked 102 new cases in the Waymart zip code alone since the last board meeting from the PA COVID dashboard. She's curious to see the numbers that were sent to the school board members. Is that possible to see those numbers?
Rose, I'll share that with Erica personally.
Thank you.
But with the concern of the increase in Waymart, I just would like to say out of the 2,000 some cases that we have, 700 plus are from the Waymart prison.
Yeah, I've been looking. Yeah, and I'll explain that to her and some of the data where I got it and how that spreadsheet reads. So I'll take care of that.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff. And Rick, I have to thank you so much. I was having heart failure.
No
So
problem.
thank you. I tried every phone, every Wi-Fi. Tonight was not my night.
No, I know you wanted to participate, so that's great. Thank you.
So thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, at this point, we do need to break to executive session. I do have some personnel matters to discuss with the board. So if we can